In today's episode, I'm sharing 5 DIY door hangers using Dollar Tree wood rounds. I hope you enjoy. For the first project, I'm removing the hanger and setting it to the side so I can add it back later because I want to stain this. I'm using some antique wax, adding a little bit of water in just a plastic container, making sure I seal the lid on very tightly and shake it up thoroughly so that it blends well together. This is going to create a nice light colored stain. I like to apply mine using a paintbrush, but you could use a foam brush if you like. Once I have the entire side covered, I will go back over that with a dry paper towel to blend it in and remove any excess. And then I'm going to set that to the side and let it dry. I found these cute color your own wooden flip-flops at Dollar Tree. I only need the flip-flops. And I'm going to set this on a block of wood because I want to drill holes in those 6 areas. I'm using a 3/16 drill bit, and you do want to be super careful because these flip-flops are super thin and the wood could split. So I drilled those 6 holes, so it should be looking something like this. Then I'm going to take a piece of sandpaper and go over that to smooth them out because I do want to cover the front of these. So I'm also going to smooth the back just to make sure I don't have any splinters. Then I'm going to take some Mod Podge and add a nice even layer all the way to the edges all over the front of these wooden flip-flops, and I'm going to let that dry. I want to cover these using this beautiful scrapbook paper from Hobby Lobby, and I just had a little bit left. So once I lined my design up, I'm going to trace these out with a pencil so that I can cut this design out. I think this is going to be so cute with those stripes on there. To attach the paper to the wooden flip-flops, I'm going to set this on a heating mat, then place my scrapbook paper and line it up on top of the wooden flip-flops, add a piece of parchment paper, and then just iron over top of that to seal the scrapbook paper to the wood. Then I'm going to let that cool down, and I am going to go ahead and add a layer of Mod Podge to the top of mine, just to make sure that I can protect this paper before I poke those holes back through because I don't want my paper to split. So once I add a coat to that, I will let that dry. To clean up those edges, I'm going to use some sandpaper to go around this entire piece, make sure I have everything sanded as close as possible. Then I'll wipe that down, and I'm going to take a sharp tool, just like this Cricut tool, turn it over to the back side so I can poke a hole in all of those 6 holes so I'll know exactly where they are on the front. And then just using the end of a paintbrush, push that through so you have a nice clean hole. To fill these in, I'm going to be using some white clothesline. You can find this at Walmart, or you could use rope or twine or whatever you like. I just happen to have some on hand, and I'm going to tape the end of that up with some painter's tape so that I'll be able to feed this through the hole. Once I did that, I did realize I needed to make the holes at the top a little bit larger so that I'll be able to put 2 strands in there. So I'm going to feed it from the back, pull it through to the front, and pull it to the back side. So just make them as long as you want or as tight or loose as you like. I'll cut that excess off and repeat it on the other side. So again, I'm just feeding it in from the back, going up to the top, feeding it in from the front towards the back. So leave a little bit of length on the back side so that when you flip this over, you'll be able to glue those end pieces down. So you don't want to have too much on the back because I want it to be as flat as I can get it. So I'm going to add some hot glue and then push that clothesline down on top of the hot glue, pressing it as flat as I can get it. You just want enough rope back there to glue down, but you don't want it to raise your flip-flops up when you add it to your sign. So once I have that side done, I'm going to repeat the same process on the other side, and look how stinking cute these little flip-flops are. I'm going to go ahead and reattach the hanger that I removed before I stained the sign just by double knotting it in the back just like it was before. I'm going to trim that excess off. And I think I'm going to set my flip-flops off to the side like this, but before I do that, I created a decal on my Cricut, and I know not everybody has a Cricut, so I do have this as a free printable on my website. The link to that's in my description box below. All you have to do is go to my website, go to free printables. You can download this at home, print it out on your printer, and then you can trace this onto your project and either paint it with white paint or using a white paint marker. I'm going to go ahead and attach those flip-flops using a really generous amount of hot glue, pressing that onto the wood sign and holding it in place until that hot glue sets up. And I love how this sign turned out, and I would love to know what you guys think. Each one of Dollar Tree's wood rounds measures about 11 3/4 of an inch, and they are much better quality this year than they were last year because they're a lot thicker. For this one, I'm going to give it 2 coats of a white acrylic paint and let that dry. I'm also using this metal sign from Dollar Tree. I'm going to disassemble it by removing the chain on each side using a small pair of pliers. Now, originally, I did want to use the welcome metal part at the top. I thought that I could pull the metal piece off the back, but it was really on there good. So then I took some tin snips and decided to cut that off. But when I did that, it does leave a piece on the very back, and I'm likely not going to use that because it's going to raise it off of my sign. For the bicycle, I'm going to flip that over and use some of Dollar Tree's button magnets. And because I want to put this on the wire itself behind each of the wheels, I'm going to use some Gorilla Glue so that I can get that on there to sit as flat as possible. Now that the paint is dry, I can go ahead and reattach the twine hanger. And then I'm going to set the bicycle as well as that metal welcome sign onto the sign so that I can figure out the placement, and then using a pencil make a mark where each of the magnets are. So I can place some Gorilla Glue in those areas and glue 2 more magnets. And of course, this is when I realized I am not going to use that metal welcome sign because I did not like the way it looked. So I've created a decal, and just like any decal that you see in today's video, I do have these as free printables on my website. The link to that's in my description box below. A neat little trick I want to share with you guys is if you have some new transfer tape and it is super sticky and you find it hard to get your decal off of it, put that on a microfiber cloth, press it flat, lift it up, and do that about twice. It really does help the decal sticking to your transfer tape, and then also it helps to release it when you put it on the sign. I don't know why, but it just makes it a little less sticky and a little easier to work with. I did place that a little bit lower because I want to add something to the top of this sign, and I'm using 2 pieces of boxwood greenery. There are going to be 2 stems on each side, and I just wrapped that in the center using some twine and double knotted it, and then I'm going to bend that to form the shape of the top of the wood round. Using some 2.5-inch wired burlap ribbon, I'm going to dovetail both of the ends by cutting that at an angle, and then create a very simple bow with 2 tails. Then I can attach that to the center of the greenery using that excess twine. Once I gather the bow in the middle, I can just place that on top of the greenery, pull it as tight as I can, and double knot that on the top. Then I'll take a piece of twine and wrap it around each side. It's going to give it a nice clean twine center of the bow, and then I'll double knot it on the back for some extra security to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. Once I cut that excess off, I could go ahead and attach this using a generous amount of hot glue to the top of the sign. And if you're wondering about the magnets, not only will they hold the metal bicycle, but this sign can be interchangeable with any similar size metal sign from Dollar Tree, like this one on this stake. They tend to pop off very easily, and since it's metal, you don't even have to add magnets to it, since it will sit flat on the magnets that are already on the sign. Of course, we did add the magnets to the bicycle because those were wires on the back of the wheels. For this project, I am going to be staining this sign using that same watered down antique wax. Once I go over that with a dry paper towel, I am going to flip this over and stain the back side. This is going to be project number 3 and 4. This is going to be a double-sided sign. While that's drying, I'm going to start working on this beautiful wooden sign from Dollar Tree. It's a watering can and it says, "Welcome to my garden." I'm going to remove that hanger, and using the same watered down antique wax, I'm going to paint the top part of this. Originally, I started just by painting in between the flowers and the base because this is a 3D sign. It has the flowers glued on top of the background. But since I got some antique wax on top of some of those flowers, I just went ahead and completely painted the top of those. So when I get ready to paint each individual one a different color, I won't have to contend with any blotchiness since all of it will have that one base coat of the antique wax. Once that dries, I'm going to take a light blue color called Surfboard and add some water to that to thin it out and make it kind of runny. When I paint the watering can, the paint can seep down in between each of those wooden letters and get the base of the watering can. So it's going to go in between each of those letters and give it this nice blue color. I will use my hairdryer to dry that in between the first coat and the second coat. Once that dries, I'm going to use a combination of paint colors. I'm using a white chalk paint. It's going to help cover up that brown. I have a sage shadow green color, a cameo pink, and a light lavender. I chose to paint the largest flower with 2 coats of the white chalk paint with a paintbrush, and then I'm going to use a Dollar Tree sponge dauber and just add a very little bit of paint to the bottom of that and spread it all across the bottom so that I can just gently go over the letters, glide the paint on there, and that will take 2 coats. And you also don't have to worry about it seeping down around the sides of the letters if you're using the sponge dauber. Then I can paint the leaves with the sage shadow. Some of the greenery stems, I'm going to add some white paint to that sage shadow just to give it a variation of green. Each of the colors that I'm painting, I am applying 2 coats and allowing it to dry in between each coat. Then I can paint the remaining flowers with the cameo pink and the light lavender. While I let that dry, I'm going to go ahead and add the twine hanger back to the wood round sign and secure that with a double knot. Then I can add a very generous amount of hot glue to the back of the watering can sign and place this right in the center of the wood round. I love how the back of the antique wax on the watering can blends in perfectly with the wood round. We're going to take that previous project, flip it over, and use the back side to make our double-sided sign. I'm using this MDF butterfly that I found at Dollar Tree, and I'm going to add a layer of Mod Podge all over the top, spreading this all the way to the edges. Then I'll set that to the side and let it dry. I found the most beautiful distressed scrapbook paper. This came out of a book from Hobby Lobby, and I'm going to flip that butterfly over so that I can trace and cut this out. Once I have that cut out, I'm then going to set this on top of my heating mat and then set my scrapbook paper directly on top of that, line it up, add a piece of parchment paper, and then iron the scrapbook paper to the Mod Podge. Once that has cooled down a little bit, I'm going to go around all of the edges with some sandpaper to get that excess off and have those nice clean lines. Wipe that down and then add another layer of Mod Podge over top of this to seal the scrapbook paper in. Once that dries, I can then add this to the bottom of the sign using a very generous amount of hot glue. And for the very top, I created another decal in this gorgeous lavender color that matches perfectly with this distressed floral scrapbook paper. This is also a free printable on my website. Again, the link to that is in my description box below. For this project, I've already removed the hanger. I'm going to give this 2 coats of a white acrylic paint, allowing it to dry in between coats, and I also made sure to paint the outside edges. Now that it's dry, I'm going to take a black Sharpie, and I'm just going to create dashes all the way around the outside edge. It doesn't have to be perfect. I wanted a whimsical outline. Then I can reattach the hanger, and I'm going to set this to the side for just a second so that I can work on this cute wooden bee that I found at Hobby Lobby. They have this in the spring shop, and a lot of times you can find these when they're on sale. I'm going to paint both of the wings with 2 coats of a white acrylic paint, allowing it to dry in between coats, and then using a black acrylic paint, I can paint the base of the bee. And I am going to go ahead and paint the outside edges of everything that I painted black, and this will only take 1 coat. Once I finished painting the face, I decided to dry brush some of that black acrylic paint around the edges of the wings, just so that they would kind of stand out and you would be able to see them better. Once that dries, I'm going to use an acrylic paint in the color Yellow Light to paint the rest of the wooden parts, and this will take 2 coats to get full coverage. Now that that's complete, I'm going to take a wood word cutout. This one says grateful, but you could use kind, thankful, humble, whatever you like. This is one I had on hand. I'm going to use a Dollar Tree sponge dauber and some black acrylic paint to go over the top of this with 1 coat. I want to create a sweet little bow for this, so I have some white ribbon, some black and white polka dot ribbon, and I didn't have any black ribbon the same width, so I do have some black fabric, and I'm going to cut that down to about the same width as the other 2 ribbons. I didn't measure these. I'm just going to cut 2 of those and then cut that in half, and then I could cut the white ribbon the same length, and I'm going to cut 4 pieces of the white, just like I have the 4 pieces of the black. But for the black and white polka dot ribbon, I'm going to cut 5 pieces because I want that to be the star of the show. I'm creating a messy bow, so I'm going to take some twine, lay that out across my table, pull it tight, and then I can start staggering these upside down on top of the twine, going in different directions. Once I have all of the ribbon on there, I'm going to take the twine, pull it as tight as I can in the center, and double knot it. Now, my arthritis was acting up this day, so I could not get it as tight as I wanted to get it in the center, so it would be a nice poofy messy bow. So I had to break out the trusty zip tie, because that always works, and you can really cinch that in the middle and get a really nice tight fit. Then I can cut that excess zip tie off. I'm going to go back and dovetail each of the ends of my bow. Now, I could have dovetailed this beforehand, but I wasn't sure how long I wanted them to be, so I held it up to the side and went back and trimmed each of these up to be much shorter. To cover up the twine and the zip tie that I had in the center, I'm using a thinner black grosgrain ribbon. I'm going to wrap that around and hot glue it. This is going to give it a nice clean look, and then I can go back and pull each of those individual ribbons and separate them, pulling them in different directions. Now we can assemble the sign. I'm going to place the bee in the middle and the woodward cutout at the bottom. To secure those in place, I'm using some hot glue. Then I attached the bow at the top. And then I wasn't completely satisfied with it yet, so once I had the bow in place, I decided to take a Sharpie marker and just make little dots on the sign off to the side so I could add some of these adorable bumblebees that I found at Dollar Tree. I decided to glue one at the bottom and one at the very end where I created all of those dots. And I still wasn't satisfied. I did not like the way the bee's face looked being solid black. So I decided to go ahead and paint that with 2 coats of that yellow light acrylic paint. And then I felt like I just painted too much of it. So I took a Sharpie, drew an outline around the face, and then filled in on the outside of that outline with the black acrylic paint. I decided to go ahead and dry brush a little bit of that black paint around the front to give it a little bit more of an outline. I decided to paint an eye and just a little bitty mouth, and this is how it turned out. I hope you enjoyed today's projects and found tons of inspiration. If you have a favorite, let me know in the comment section down below because I always love to know which one is your favorite. If you haven't subscribed already, I would love you to click that subscribe button right below the video. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. Please take care, and I'll see you guys next time.